Matt has been officiating for over 2 decades, and he has the unenviable job of trying to coordinate officials for the Division I football league within the HHSAA. Being an official is not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of things going on with it. In addition to that, there's a lot of things going on with football. And here to tell you all about it is Matt Sumstine. Come on up, Matt.
Let me go ahead and pull up my first screen then, if I can do this properly. There we go. So we're going to work in 2 different directions. I'll let you know when we have something important to look at. But there was a sheet of paper up here. I had a little crib note sheet that I was going to use. All right, let me find it. See, this is how games get delayed.
Is it underneath there?
But that's all right. I'll wing it. It's like when you go out on a football field and you come out of the locker room and you realize when you get on the field and you're ready for the kickoff, you forgot your flag. That's kind of where I'm at right now. When I was asked to come in, I didn't have a presentation that I had formally set up for anybody, but I'd been giving a lot of thought recently to some of the communication and some of the perceptions that happen with the officiating community. And it's not just a football, but football's the one that I'm intimately familiar with. So I started thinking, well, what do I hear the most on the football field outside of my job? And the answer to that question was, hey, ref, followed by something. Right, so I started thinking, well, okay, well, what are some of the things that, that these guys would say to me? So what comes next and how I interpret it? So the first one that I interpreted as you're being the greatest was when a guy tells me, you're only half as bad as the guy the week before. Right? To me, that means I'm pretty good, right? I'm the greatest guy out there as far as a football official. Awesome call. You know, when somebody tells me I made an awesome call, what they're saying to me that allows me to interpret that is, you finally called it. It's been happening the whole game. You finally called it. To me, that means I just made an awesome call. Great job. That's what I interpret when somebody says, well, at least you got your shoes tied today. You're my hero. That's when somebody says, if I were you, I'd kill myself. Because I know that if they were in my position, they would be overwhelmed by the responsibility. Hey, can I have your autograph? Is when they want to supply my name and number to their attorney because somebody got hurt. But from a perception standpoint, it's all funny because we all feel that way about officials. We go out there and we're passionate about the ball game, and we're out there to root for our team. So there's no way that we're disinterested in the outcome as a fan. But the officials are. It's totally a different ball game for us. So this is what they think. So when you look at the screen, you look up there and you got the guy in the upper left. Well, he needs assistance. And the other guy's confused, and the other guy's mad. You got a guy that's flag happy, a guy that can't see, another guy that's arrogant, a guy has a chip on his shoulder, and an idiot. I got these just by going on to Yahoo or Google and did referee clip art. This is what came up. Right? Not something, oh thanks ref. This is what came up. So, but in reality, when you talk about football officials, this is who they are. They're people. They're police officers, armed forces, bus drivers, engineers, postal workers, lifeguards, and your neighbors. We're all professionals. When we officiate, even to the level of the NFL, we have lives and other jobs and other responsibilities and families. So when you're doing a high school or a youth game and you're going to meetings every Monday night and you're spending time in the rule book and you spend $150 a year on your uniform and you're commuting and not getting paid for your gas and you're earning maybe $50 a game, you got to understand that they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they love the sport. So how do we transition from real life into the guy that loves the sport? The official that's going to go in there and do a job, even though somebody's going to yell at him, "Hey, ref." Well, it all starts because we know they love the game. So what we have to do is we have to build a foundation for every official to incorporate so that we're consistent. Everybody wants consistency. Coaches, fans, players. If you're inconsistent, nobody knows what you're doing. And then somebody will yell, "Hey, ref," at you. So here's where we start. And this probably translates to most sports. But with an official, we have to have a foundation, a cornerstone of a building, or something that we can always fall back on. And that's the mechanics level. For those of you guys that would want to know what mechanics in football is, it's where you are positioned physically, and it's where you're positioned visually. And sometimes those are two different things, right? We're not ball watchers, or at least we're not supposed to. So once you know where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to wear, and where you're supposed to look, you got most of it knocked. Then we go into rule knowledge. Well, what do we do when we get there? So we study the rules, and we have clinics, and we make videos, and we make people proficient in the rules. But the next one is really the curveball from officiating standpoint. That's the philosophy. How many of you ever heard you can call holding on every play? Anybody ever heard that? No. Well, it's true and it's not true, because if you utilize philosophies, there's not holding on every play. Because holding by the rule book is if you close your hand on a guy's shirt. But that's not holding to me, because what if you're just standing there? Right? What if you're just going to the prom? Right? That's not holding. It's only holding if the guy tries to get away and you dip him, or you turn him, or you twist him, or you restrict him somehow illegally. So this isn't holding, even though by definition it is, because by philosophy it's not. Which is why a lot of times you'll hear from the sidelines, if you're close enough to the field, "Holding, that's holding, he's been holding him all day." Well, no, he hasn't, because by philosophy he's not holding. So we refer to philosophy as the filter that the rules have to pass through before you can apply judgment. So it's a pretty simple process, but it takes a while. I mean, when I started reading the high school rule book 25 years ago, it took me 3 years to understand a basic penalty enforcement principle that I was quite embarrassed about when I figured it out. Because it's a whole new language. When you talk about fumble versus muff versus touch versus force versus impetus, I mean, there's all kinds of words in there that you just don't normally hear. And I think Dan Deerdorf, as an announcer, made up about 10 more. So that's the process where we try to get people into a position so they can officiate. Experience takes care of the rest, and then of course you have to follow that up primarily with film review. So once we have guys to a position where they can manage, and the reason why we do this is because officials are the guardians of the game. It's all fun and games until somebody gets a concussion or somebody's knee gets bent in half. So we really focus on the safety of the players. We're out there not to be bossy and not to yell and not to get emotional. We're out there to promote a rhythm, which is the purpose of a play clock. In many sports we have them. Do you have a play clock in your sport? Because yeah, you got a 30-minute time, but do you have a play clock? From the 10 seconds. Yeah, so you do, right? There's always got to be a tempo, or things start, you might start hitting people with your mallet. So in football, we have a tempo. At the collegiate level, as soon as it plays over, 40-second clock is running. That means the ball's got to be snapped in 40 seconds. High school, they have to chop it and you get 25. The NFL, I think, is 45. And then, of course, there's 1,000 different variables depending on at what point in the game you're at. This is the public service announcement that was made as a result of the football officials approaching the HHSAA to get something out to the public to protect the players.
The HHSAA is determined to make plays safer by leading the effort in concussion awareness. Concussion awareness means teaching players proper techniques.
It means making sure my equipment fits right, because serious injury is no fun.
It means enforcing the penalties for flagrant helmet-to-helmet contact.
It means the recognition and education of the signs and symptoms of a concussion.
You can do your part by visiting our website at sportshigh.com.
Once we put that word out, then people started asking us questions. Well, what are you going to do to protect our players? And then we really had to go to work, not only at the high school level, but at the collegiate level and at the NFL level. The scales have tipped. You remember the let them play screams from the field? Those are not nearly as happening as often anymore. Now it's protect our players and protect our kids and protect our brain function that concussions so readily take away. So we had to come up with some categories of the people that were most susceptible to being hit and getting a concussion. And here they are. They're the defenseless players. We keep an eye on the receivers, the passer we've always done. Upright sliding runner quarterback, blindside blocks, or otherwise known as peel back blocks. You guys have seen those on change of possession plays. Kickers, punt returners, players away from the action who aren't doing anything, and anybody who loses a helmet. So if you're a defenseless player, it doesn't mean you can't be hit. It just means there's a higher degree of scrutiny as to how you're hit. And the center mass is all you get. No longer do you get the neck, the chin, or the head. So we're focusing on these players, and we're looking at hit indicators. Legal hit indicators are head-up tackle, wrap-up tackle, head to the side, or if the person who's carrying the ball or who is otherwise defenseless changes his position immediately prior to the hit. So all those are plays that we probably see a pass on. Targeting indicators. These are the ones that alert us. These raise our red flags. We came up with 4 criteria: the launch, the upward thrust, the strike, or the spear, which is also known as the crown of the helmet. So a launch is any time anybody turns themselves into a missile and leaves their feet. Just like a rocket, right? They're launching. There's no place you can hit a player if you do that other than high. That's a real red flag for us. An upward thrust is the same thing without leaving the ground. It's a lot harder to detect. The strike is, of course, that sort of thing. And then the spear or the crown of the helmet is right on top. And I want to bring up a couple you can leave it, it's fine. I was going to bring up a couple of points about that were interesting to me. One is the announcements of the OC16 people, where they're very supportive of this type of call and this type of act. And the reason so is because they're being educated by me. They're getting all the training tapes. I'm meeting with Dave Vinton. Their announcers are watching these videos. And then when they get on the TV, they can then now support the philosophies and the game plan of the officiating community to try to protect these players. So I'm really happy that OC16 is working with us in regard to that. Some of these plays, when you look at them, some people say, well, that's just football. Well, football's changing. In fact, it's changing very quickly. When I was working high school ball, and this probably was about 12 years ago, before all of this hype about concussions ever came up, and I was working a game at Kailua, and I was the white hat, so I was the guy in the offensive backfield. And the quarterback set back to pass, and he let one go. And there was a defender coming in on him, and we have what's called a 2-step rule, right? If he takes less than 2 steps, it's not roughing. Well, that's really more of a timing issue. Nobody can count steps. But this guy was close to the quarterback, but he came in, crown of the helmet, in the ear hole, and the quarterback was out, instantly out. And I was about midway through my high school career, and there wasn't a big point of emphasis on it. And I immediately, in my gut, I was like, that's a foul. But I didn't throw it, because there wasn't training available for us to recognize that and buy into it. And as the longer that kid sat on the ground, well, laid on the ground more accurately, the worse I felt. And I started to physically become affected by that feeling. You know how when you stand up to speak, like a couple times today, my face got a little flushed and you get some goosebumps and you start to feel a little bit funny? That's how I felt. And I'll never forget that feeling. And I'll never forget how I felt that day. And ever since that day, anytime I saw a hit like that, it was a foul. And there came a point in another game where a player got hit and we called the foul, and I went up to him and gave him the finger test, not the middle finger test. You know, how many am I holding up? And he was really unresponsive. So I said, you're out. You're not coming back. And there was a team doctor on the sideline. And he said, well, he can come back. I'll clear him. And I said, give it to me in writing. He said, I'm not going to give it to you in writing, but he can come back in. I said, no, he can't, because I'll never forget that feeling. And I will never be responsible for a player coming back into a game that isn't medically cleared if I feel that he has any symptom of a concussion. And that's the message we're passing on. So that's where we're going with that. That's why these training videos are being produced, to help our officials to better recognize these issues. We got our training clinic coming up. This is the 10th year that I've produced a training clinic. This year we're bringing in 4 NFL officials and 12 Division I college officials to work with our local officials on all islands. They're coming in to meet here. And we have a 3-day clinic. So if you guys ever want to just come sit in, you know, we're not going to charge you for it, just come sit in. We're going to do games at Waipahu, Mililani, Lilihua, Wanaloa. We're going to have all-day class sessions at McKinley and do some field work on Sunday at the university. So that's the big training deal of the year for these guys. And they all really appreciate it. So that's a picture from Waipahu last year. That's Carl Sheffers. He's an NFL white hat. And we have representatives there from Kauai and Oahu and Maui. And on my card that I handed out, my recruiting card, one of the problems with officiating is what I mentioned at the very opening. Guys are spending a lot of time and not making any money. And I'm not asking you to pay them more money. I'm just asking you to keep an open mind to people you run into, people who may be interested. I was working a ladies flag football league recently, and I couldn't believe the talent level and the game knowledge level of these ladies. I'd love to get like 20 of them in the clinic, and well, we just changed the face of football on Oahu. So don't displace anybody from your mind as a possible candidate for officiating, and not just football. All sports need officials. So I want to show you the bumper stickers I'm making up, you know, so we can all buy these. At the next clinic, we'll have all these printed out, so you guys can put them all over your cars and your vans. All right. Now, as far as the formal slide presentation, that's all I have. I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah. Oh, we have time.
Okay. Just to give you guys categories, I can answer any question that will not get me in trouble collegiately. I can answer any high school question, probably most NFL questions.
I noticed that in your presentation here, it's always a defensive guy. So does the offensive guy in that one deal where he lowered his head and went after the defensive guy, does he get a pass?
Well, in that particular play, he didn't lower his head to go after the defensive guy. He lowered his head as a reaction to losing possession of the ball. But to answer your question, can the offense be penalized? Yes, they can. But the onus is on the defense.
So the offensive guy kind of gets a free pass?
No, but the onus is on the defense. The NFL recently put in a rule that specifically discusses offensive players. And I'm not saying that translates to every rule book, but their rule is if the offensive player is between the tackles, he's not guilty, meaning he's running in that inside lane. If he's on the outside and he's in a crowd, he's not guilty. When the offensive player becomes suspect for an illegal helmet contact is when he's in the open field, and I'm getting a little old to stutter step, so I'm not going to give you the show. But when he stutter steps a defensive player into a off-balance or stationary posture, you understand what I mean by that? So he turns the corner, he gives him the little shoulder juke. So if that defender is now stuck in a non-combative position, and then the offensive player intentionally crowns him, then that's a foul on the offense.
I think this is a question. You said the game is changing. I'm thinking about Super Bowl this year, and the Seahawks. We're playing a very interesting defensive game, particularly against the wide receivers who are coming across the middle. Any comments about the changes that seemed rather apparent, which I can't put my finger on, in that game, of how that was being done?
You're right, I'm not sure if that is a question. But I'll give you my I'm not sure if this is the answer. The NFL is very serious about helmet contact, and what's driving all this is litigation, quite frankly. The long-term effects of those helmet hits, particularly in the NFL, and not because you're in the NFL, but if you're in the NFL, you played Pop Warner, you played high school, you played college, and you got years and years and years of contact under your belt. So by the time you get to the NFL, you may already be in trouble. So to answer the question about the Super Bowl, the adjustments are already made. The NFL is different than any other level because the NFL is fine-based. They're very rarely ejection-based. The big penalty there is suspensions and fines. The penalty in college is ejections, and depending on where and when it happened will determine whether you're going to be out the next game. And even if there's a hit in a college game that's not called on the field, if the supervisors look at the film, they can eject them from there. So that's how serious they've gotten about hits. I would like to take that to the high school level. There are many things I'm doing at the high school level that I'm trying to advance some of these polices of these types of hits, because I watch every single game that's played at the stadium on video, and I watch every single OC16 game that's played because I record them, and I pull all these plays. I've got a cache of thousands and thousands of plays, and you just saw a small piece of them here today. But with this ammunition, I call it, we have to change the game. Otherwise, the game will go away.